Well, hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into one of the most fascinating cassette decks that you've probably never used or even heard of. It's called the Vesna 309-4, and it was built in the late Soviet Union. Now, I know what you're thinking. Soviet electronics, isn't that just heavy, clunky, outdated stuff? Well, yes and no. This machine is a time capsule from a world where audio gear wasn't just for fun. It was survival. It was resistance and expression. Now, this deck didn't just play tapes. It played banned Western rock, bootleg concerts, and secret folk recordings passed from hand to hand when the official airwaves were silent. And today, we're not just looking at the Vesna specs. We're going to explore the entire world that it came from. A world of black markets, backroom repair shops, and Cold War era creativity. Let's get into it. In the West, 1980s audio was all about innovation. You had Walkmans, Dolby noise reduction, LED meters. Hi-fi was getting slick. But in the USSR, consumer electronics were a very different beast. There was no private competition. All production was controlled by state-run factories. So instead of Sony, JVC, or Pioneer, you had brands like Electronica, Radiotechnica, and Vesna. These weren't brands in the modern sense. They were just product lines that were assigned to specific manufacturing plants that were often military affiliated. Even the Vesna name, which means spring in Russian, was assigned to a factory in Kiev, now the capital of Ukraine. And this factory built radios, cassette decks, and reel-to-reels under a directive from Gosplan, the Soviet Central Planning Authority. Now, the question with them wasn't, how do we make the best cassette deck? It was, how many should we make? How cheaply? And can we meet the quota? And yet, despite that, something like the Vesna 309-4 still ended up being surprisingly capable. So let's take a quick look at the 309-4 itself before we tear it apart. Now, design-wise, it's pure late Soviet industrial. It's got a solid metal faceplate, it's got oversized buttons, and a utilitarian layout that looks like it was designed in a submarine, which, it might have been. Many engineers behind Soviet consumer gear also worked in military tech. Now let's look at some of the features on this thing. It's got a manual recording level with physical sliders. There's no LEDs. It's an analog VU meter. It's got a bias selector for normal, chrome, and ferrochrome, something you don't see on Western decks very often. And it's a belt-driven transport that is surprisingly smooth and robust. So here's where it gets interesting. Soviet electronics often used locally sourced components, so the quality, it varied wildly. You might get a Vesna that runs perfectly for 40 years, or you might get one that eats tapes after a month. That variability is kind of part of the mystique. Now let's zoom out for a second and talk about what these decks actually meant to people. The USSR had a complex relationship with Western music. Now officially, most Western rock and pop was banned from radio, but privately, people were obsessed. Cassettes became a lifeline. Friends would trade homemade recordings of Queen, Pink Floyd, Deep Purple, bands that symbolized freedom and rebellion. And the term for this underground distribution was magnetizdat, from the word magnetophone, tape recorder, and samizdat, self-publishing. Now imagine being 18 years old in 1985 Moscow. You couldn't buy a Beatles tape at a store, but maybe your cousin got a bootleg from someone who knew a guy in Leningrad. If you had a Vesna deck, you could copy that tape from your friends. And so the music spread. And in many ways, cassette decks like the Vesna weren't just appliances. They were cultural weapons, tools for preserving identity and sharing subversive ideas and escaping state control. So let's talk about something that Western manufacturers often overlook: repairability. Now, Soviet engineers knew that people would be using their gear for decades. So the Vesna is modular inside. It's got large components, clearly labeled boards, and no proprietary ICs. You need to replace a motor? Easy. Rewire a connection? No problem. Schematic diagrams were even included with some units. Now, many Soviet citizens didn't just use these decks. They became their own technicians. So radio repair was a common side hustle. Some teenagers even built audio kits from scratch. And that DIY culture lives on today. If you find a working Vesna, chances are someone took it apart at least once and maybe even improved it. So let's take a look at this one, take it apart, and see if we've got a good one or a bad one. Hopefully it can be fixed. Fingers crossed. Now it looks like somebody's probably already been in here. A lot of the screws are already missing. There's no screws here. It's missing one there, and I've got 2 screws on the back. So I'm guessing somebody's been in here and tried to repair this thing before and it hasn't worked. So we'll see what we come up with. Hopefully we can get this thing working and playing some Soviet synth pop from the late 80s. Give it a fitting tribute here. So there's that one. Get this one out. See if that releases the back on this. I don't see any other screws in here. The one that's in the battery compartment's already missing. And they're flathead screws too. I assume those are original. There we go. Well, no, that one's kind of different looking. Maybe these aren't the original screws. But these are meant to be repaired, so hopefully we can get this thing apart and see what's going on with it. Because it does appear to power up, but nothing happens, so maybe we just have a bad belt in here. Alright, so get ready for our first look. Well, that's kind of neat. The battery compartment just connects with those 2 contacts right here. Do have some connections here that are socketed, which is kind of neat. Has kind of the typical Soviet circuit board on here. Looks like, you know, the traces were done by hand. Looks like the soldering was done by hand. You know, overall not a bad looking unit. I do see the motor down here. Looks like the belt is goop. So let's see if we can take this circuit board off and move it out of the way and maybe get a better view of what that mechanism looks like under there. Sure, I don't see any other screws in here. Looks like those just pop out of the way. There we go. And there's our mechanism. Nice big flywheels. They're drilled into, so it looks like they did balance those, which is kind of cool. But yeah, the belt has looks like actually it looks like maybe it just came off. I can't really tell where it went. Oh, yeah, it looks like maybe it goes around this larger flywheel here. Before I take this belt out of here, I want to see if I can find the path. Okay, so it looks like maybe that is the way that goes around there. Circuit board looks nice. It has that common Soviet smell to it. We do have DIN connectors on here too, so probably an input and output for hooking up to another tape deck to record into it. Alright, well, let's see if we can get this off of here, and then we'll find some belts that will fit this and see if we can get the belts replaced. Alright, I think I found a couple of belts that'll be suitable for our purpose here, so go ahead and get these put on here. Our support put back on. Well, I guess we got a bad one. The motor seized up and it just will not work. But it was fascinating to take a look inside of this thing. I mean, it's all true. It's modular, it's repairable. I mean, a really robust design. I really, really like it. I do wish that we could have got this Vesna with its Michael Jackson sticker working, but, you know, it's still a good-looking unit that'll look good here in the studio. Maybe someday I'll find a motor that I can replace it and actually get it working. So what does the Vesna 309-4 represent today? Well, to me, it's not just a curiosity. It's a symbol of how people adapt, how they find joy in music and meaning, even when the systems around them try to limit expression. Owning one of these is like holding a little piece of audio resistance history. It reminds us that technology is never neutral. It reflects culture, politics, ideology, and ultimately the human need to connect. Now, if you're a collector, a history buff, or just love machines with a story, I can't recommend digging into Soviet-era gear enough. It's raw, it's real, and it's got stories you won't find in a glossy brochure. Now, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this deeper dive, hit like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments. Have you ever used Soviet tech? What's your favorite piece of Cold War era gear? Now, until next time, stay curious and keep your tapes spinning, and I'll see you in the next video.